Welcome in or welcome back to my channel. My name is Deb from DG Reads, and this is my furry sidekick Kylie, and we're here today with some romance recommendations. Now, when you think of romance readers, I don't think I'm the first person who would come to mind. I've been known to say I don't read romance. I've been known to say romance is my least read genre, and it's not always 100% true. So I thought it would be interesting to kind of look back over my reading history and pull out books that I have really enjoyed that would fall within kind of a romance or a romance mashup type of genre and see what I have. And maybe that would give me or you or just generally an idea of what works and what doesn't work for me in romance. So starting with a few kind of contemporary, which I think is probably my least read area of romance potentially, I have a few that I have truly enjoyed over the years. The Love Hypothesis by Ali Hazelwood. This is one that I picked up as part of a buddy read when I received an ARC for it when it was first coming out from Berkley Publishing, and I wound up really falling in love with this one. I think I gave it 5 stars at the time, which is not super common for me with romance, and I liked the fact that we had a focus on a woman in STEM. I liked the fact that the relationship had banter and progression without immediately jumping into bed. I liked just the kind of fun aspect of this as a read and having it be a buddy read experience as well with a bunch of other people who were truly enjoying it. So it was a good time overall. This did kind of lead to me making Ali Hazelwood kind of an auto read author, and her most recent books haven't all been ones that I've enjoyed. Not in Love, I did not like the fact that it was very heavily about the sexual relationship. That just wasn't what I was looking for in it. And Bride hasn't called to me to pick it up, but I definitely have enjoyed most of her STEM related books, and she is an author that I will try again in the future. In this one, we're following Olive, who is a PhD candidate, and she is trying to convince her best friend that she's living a well-rounded life, that she's dating, and in order to do that, she winds up just kind of panicking and walking up to the first man she kind of sees and kissing him, and it turns out he's a professor. And this turns into a fake dating situation, some silly moments here and there, but overall a really good time. Emily Henry is an author that I've been known to describe as a romance writer for non-romance readers, and I think that there's a lot in these books that isn't strictly romance, and I know a lot of romance readers don't always necessarily love her stuff, but I've had a really good time with all of her books that I've read. Her most recent Funny Story I think is my favorite of hers, and I think partially that's because we've got a main character who is a librarian, and that leads to some fun, really bookish moments in the library, and we've got a relationship in here that starts as kind of almost rivals, but not really necessarily, and then it becomes friendship, and then it becomes something more than friendship. Daphne has been dumped, and she's kind of been living her life for this man she was with, and she makes a proposal to the ex of the woman that her ex dumped her for, and proposes that they turn into roommates. She's a childhood librarian and doesn't have a ton of money and needs the support, and maybe the two of them together can build a little bit of a friendship, maybe a plan when it comes to the people they've lost, and of course this develops into a relationship in the long run. I really like her books and the way they are bookish in nature themselves, and that always draws me into a book, I think, as well, and I had a really excellent time reading this one. Mariana Zapata is an author who really excels at making a slow burn, from what I've heard and what I've read. I've only read a couple of hers so far, but really have enjoyed them. Culty is a book that I picked up originally based on a random recommendation. There was a TV show pitch that was on Fox. It only lasted for 10 episodes, but I truly loved the show. And another fan of the show recommended this book as having very similar vibes. So I picked this up stuff, and I wound up loving it. Her books are not short. They do take their time, but that is because she truly does the slow burn. It takes a while for the relationship to develop, and in the meantime, you see that progression over time in the space of these books. I reread this one not that long ago, and it still held up as a book I really enjoyed, and I do want to explore more of her books for that reason. In this one, we're following Sal, who is a soccer player. She is getting the opportunity of a lifetime to be coached by her childhood idol, Colty. And this is supposed to be a dream come true, but it doesn't exactly go according to plan. He is very much the grumpy to her sunshine, and it takes a while for this to develop. And this is one I still look back on very fondly, and like I said, I would really like to read more of her books. And then lastly, for contemporary, I have Nora Roberts, and her books kind of cross over multiple genres at times, but she's definitely a nostalgia reader for me. She's a cozy, warm experience type of read for me. I grew up reading a lot of her books when I was younger, and over time have just kind of kept picking up her books as they come out. The most recent series I've been reading starts with this one. This is Inheritance, and it's part of the Lost Bride trilogy. This one crosses over with some fantasy, with some horror elements, and I really like the way she blends the genres together. If you are a hardcore fantasy reader, I don't think I'd necessarily recommend her fantasy romance books to you, but I think because I go into them expecting what I'm going to get out of them, I think they work well for me. They're very much insta-lovey, which is not something I typically like. Relationships form quite quickly in these books. There's not a lot of kind of lead up to that, but again, I think because I expect that going into it, that's okay for me. There's a lot of warm family. There's lots of good friendships involved in these books, and I really like that kind of combination of family and found family that comes out of these. In this particular series, we are following Sonia. She finds out that her father had a twin that she didn't know about, and through him, she's now inherited this fancy house. And it's haunted. It's very much haunted, but mostly in a fun way. We've got a ghost who plays music to communicate with them. We've got ghosts who help pick out outfits and do the dishes, those types of things. It's kind of a fun ghost story. And there is, however, one kind of sinister ghost inhabiting this house. And this has created a kind of curse on this house that marriages don't last because someone dies. The lawyer for her uncle's family is someone she immediately meets. She falls for quite quickly, and he acknowledges the fact that this house is haunted. He's had experiences there as well. And it is a trilogy. I've read the first two, enjoyed both, and I'm very excited to get the third one. I think it's coming out toward the end of this year, and I'm very much eager to get there. And with that one kind of crossing the line with a little bit of a horror element, I would also throw in another horror book that does get classified also as romance, and that is Voices in the Snow by Darcy Coates. This is book one in a quartet of books, the Black Winter series. Claire awakens in a strange house. It's kind of gothic, it's kind of dark, it's kind of in the middle of nowhere, and she doesn't exactly remember how she got there. Something has happened in the wider world, and as the series goes on, you get to know more about that, but initially it really is that very isolated setting. There's a man who has brought her here and is taking care of her, and it is a romance, so relationship does ensue with this, but I really enjoyed this as a Darcy Coates. It has a lot of good atmosphere, a lot of good build up to the plot in general, and the romance is just part of the package, and I think that's what I really enjoyed about this series, and I would recommend it. And then definitely the area of romance I read the most in is when it comes to fantasy romance or romantasy, or whichever way you want to classify these particular books. I don't personally see a big dividing line between the two terms. I know some people do, others don't. That's fine either way. So, starting off in this category, I have When the Moon Hatched by Sarah A. Parker. And for me, this one really sticks in my mind because of the world building, the idea of dragons and dragon eggs, and the way they are tied to the moons. There is a romance that develops out of this. You don't really start figuring out what's going on with that until we get into the latter half of the book. I read this when it was self-published, and it has been picked up, and I had to pick up this gorgeous Fairy Loot edition because I just enjoyed it so much. I had to have a copy on my shelves if I don't drop it and ruin it in the filming of this process. But I got Dragon, and it's just a really pretty edition. We're following a main character who's an assassin for a rebellion, and we're also following a dragon rider in here. They wind up running into each other, and we start to learn more things about both of them. And I think this just had such a cool world system. I just was hooked, even though it is rather large. I binge read this maybe 24 hours, maybe a little bit more than that, but it was a fantastic time. Speaking of binging, there are a couple of series that I have binged in the fantasy romance category. First of those is Air Awakens by Elise Kova. This is a 5-book fantasy romance series, and it begins with Vala, and she is a librarian apprentice. She's immersed in the world of books. But then one day she accidentally saves someone, and she finds out he's actually the crown prince and a sorcerer, and she has to kind of make a decision of whether she sticks with her world of books or if she goes into the world of sorcery. And this is a series that I absolutely fell into. I had originally read A Trial of Sorcerers by the same author, and that is set later in the same world, and I really enjoyed that one and do plan to go ahead and pick up the rest of that series as well, but I decided to go back to the Air Awakens series first and read that one. And I took this with me both in ebook and audio when I went to Italy, and it was the perfect travel book because it kept me really engaged, but it also didn't require that much brain power to stay up with what was going on. And I read a little bit each night before I went to bed. I read some on the planes, and I think I finished the last book right after I got home. So I binged the majority of this series over in Italy, so it has a lot of fond memories for me with that as well. And then another series that I binged this past year was the Lady of Darkness series by Melissa K. Rourke, and this is again a 5-book series plus a novella, and it had me really hooked. I'd heard several people hyping this series up, and so I was excited and also a little nervous to get to it because I never know with fantasy romance. But this one immediately drew me in, and I wound up binging the full series over a pretty short period of time and was budding reading this with friends, and it just was a fantastic experience. In this one, we're following Scarlet, who has been trained with her sisters to be an assassin, and she's given jobs and she's required to do them. But this latest job she's been given is really an opportunity she's been wanting. If she accomplishes this job, she will get revenge against the Fire Prince who killed her mother. And that is part of the story. There's also a mystery element of missing children. There's the Fae world versus the human world, and where magic can happen and where it can't. There's unique kind of magic elements. There's unique relationships going on in here. There's characters you don't like that you eventually do like. And I think there's just so much going on through the space of this series that had me extremely engaged. I also really did like in here, there are elements of miscommunication. There are elements of roughness to the different relationships, but they get resolved. They communicate. They talk things out. They don't drag out misunderstandings and those types of things, which can drive me crazy in a romance. Miscommunication trope is one thing that will absolutely knock points off for a book for me, but I think it was really well done in this particular series. Recent read that I just couldn't put down was Empire of Flame and Thorns by Marian Blackwood. This is the first book in a new series with a sequel due out in February, so I'm excited for that. This is set in a world of Fae that has been overtaken by dragon shifters, and the Fae are cut off from the rest of the world and basically trapped and ruled by these shifters. Every once in many, many years, there is a series of trials where they take a few people out beyond the walls of their enclosed area. We're following Selena, who is an unlikely hero in a lot of ways. She's part of the Fae Rebellion, but kept kind of on the outskirts and not given a lot of power in that regard. But she's determined to enter into these trials. Her power is related to emotion, and this is not really a power that necessarily leads to success in this type of trials. So she has to be creative with how she goes about things and how she enacts her powers against her competitors, against the shifters. She, of course, catches the eye of one of these dragon shifters, and he seems determined to keep her out of these trials and is working against her at every opportunity. There's great banter, there's great tension. I didn't think the writing was the best, I will be honest there, but I was having so much fun with the trial elements and the unique magic and the world that I really wasn't bothered by the fact that the writing wasn't always the best. And I do think the writing improved by the end of the book, so I'm really eager to pick up the sequel for this one. Another book that I would classify as kind of a popcorn read, like the last one, is Powerless by Lauren Roberts. This is another one where we are not necessarily getting the absolute best writing, but we're getting the absolute hook and fun of a trial setting, of great banter, and so many elements that I did really enjoy. This book is set in a world where there was a plague, and this plague left some people with powers and some people just ordinary. And it was decreed that all the ordinaries would be killed. Hayden is an ordinary who has been passing as someone with magical abilities, and it's a difficult way to live, but she's been making it work. She unknowingly winds up saving one of the elites, a prince, and this leads to her getting pulled into the purging trials, where she's going up against people with a lot of power, and she of course has her fake psychic abilities to lean on. She has an innate ability to read people, and that helps her out in a lot of ways, but she has a difficult road ahead of her. The prince is also involved in these trials, and there's an attraction between them. Like I said, there's great banter between them, and it's a wild ride and a book that I had a hard time putting down. The second book in the series, Reckless, is out, and I read that one. I didn't love it as much. It felt very much like a middle book, and it was getting past what happened at the end of Powerless and leading up to potential for really good things, I think, in book 3 when that one comes out to finish off the trilogy. So I'm very eagerly awaiting that one and have high hopes. One book that I think has been all over the booktube, bookstagram, book internet in general, has been Quicksilver by Callie Hart, and I, among many, have really loved this book. We're following a character, Ceres, who has been living in a human world and trying to make ends meet. It's been a difficult life, but she winds up inadvertently opening a doorway between worlds, and she winds up on the Fae side, a world of ice and snow, and very different from her desert home. Unbeknownst to her, the Fae are real. All the legends and things of myth are real. They've just maybe been on the other side of this portal. She winds up bound to Kingfisher, who is a Fae warrior and someone who is looking to use her abilities that she didn't know she had really to help out his world. And she needs him to get back home. And it winds up being a very good relationship. Again, there's banter, there's unique weapons, there's unique magic systems, and all of those things together had me very hooked on this book as well. And then last but not least, one of the last favorites I read just this past year was Servant of Earth by Sarah Hawley. And this is again a book with trials, with complicated relationships, and it just absolutely drew me in. I got this this as an ARC copy from PRH Audio, and I binge read the entire book that way. We're following Kenna, who has always kind of been a wild child, but she winds up crossing over into the Fae realm and is put into the role of a servant there. She's assigned to a girl who is undergoing their trials, and each house in this world has its own element and conducts its own trial as part of a series of trials. And Kenna can't participate, but she's sneakily behind the scenes is helping her mistress out, hoping to let her win the games, because she didn't seem to have the best opportunities, the best chances, I guess I would say, to start with. This is a world that is underground, which I found really interesting. They don't really go up to the surface very often, and there are really interesting trials involved in here as well. There's two potential love interests, I would say, going on in here, and I didn't really vibe with the one that she's maybe the most drawn to, but I see a lot of potential when we get into a next book for what we're going to get as this expands. I really liked how this one ended, and I am eagerly awaiting a sequel. So I think it's clear there's definitely things I have in common between these different books. There's definitely some outliers though that maybe don't necessarily fit a pattern. So I'm not always sure going into a romance what I'm going to like about it. Things that definitely draw me in terms of my attentions are trials in a fantasy setting for sure. The idea of kind of a bookish book will definitely get my attention. I very much prefer a slow burn or an enemies to lovers type of situation in most cases, and I really want there to be a world and a plot outside of just the romance in most of the books that I pick up. So with that in mind, let me know in the comments below, do you have any books in particular that you would recommend to me? I would definitely love to get some additional recommendations to explore the genre a little bit more. And if you've made it this far and you don't have anything to comment, give me a heart emoji, because that seems appropriate for a romance video. If you could hit that like button below, I would surely appreciate it, and subscribe if you're interested in seeing more of my romance exploration, more of my general all over the place genre reading, and my bookish content in general. But for now, I will leave you here and see you real soon in a new video.